They disinvited me from my own sister's wedding, claiming I'd ruined the perfect vibe. What they didn't know was that I was about to uncover the devastating truth behind their carefully constructed facade. The scent of hydrangeas and entitlement has followed my family my entire life. For my sister Amelia's wedding, it had been cranked up to an almost suffocating level. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, weren't just planning a wedding. They were curating an experience, a living, breathing testament to their success and taste. Every detail, from the exact shade of champagne gold for the napkins to the string quartet's playlist, was scrutinized with the intensity of a military operation. I was a bridesmaid, a role I accepted with a familiar sense of resignation. It meant smiling, nodding, and pretending that my mother's fifth monologue about the importance of ice sculptures was genuinely fascinating. The first crack in the perfect veneer appeared during the final bridesmaid dress fitting. The dress was a confection of satin and tulle, beautiful but notoriously unforgiving. As I stood in front of the three-way mirror, I could feel a seam digging sharply into my side. "It's a little tight under the arm," I said, trying to subtly adjust it. "Maybe they can let it out just a tiny bit? It might be uncomfortable for a 12-hour day." My mother, Eleanor, who was observing from a velvet settee with the posture of a reigning monarch, let out a delicate sigh, the kind of sigh that says, "Why must you always be so difficult?" Amelia glanced from me to our mother, her expression a nervous flicker. "It looks fine, Sarah," Mom said, her voice smooth but edged with steel. "The designer assured us this is the most flattering silhouette. We can't start making alterations now, it would ruin the uniformity." "I'm not trying to ruin anything," I said, keeping my tone light. "I just want to be able to lift my arms for the bouquet toss without ripping the dress." My father, who had been scrolling through stock prices on his phone, finally looked up. "Sarah, let's not create problems where there are none. Your mother and sister have worked tirelessly to make this perfect. Just enjoy being a part of it." That was his classic line. Being a part of it was code for, "Shut up and be the person we want you to be." I was the family's square peg, the one who asked practical questions instead of gushing over aesthetics, the one who valued honesty over harmony. To them, my realism wasn't a personality trait. It was a defect, a persistent vibe they were constantly trying to manage. I dropped it, of course. I stood there, smiling stiffly, while the seam gnawed at my skin, a perfect champagne gold soldier in Amelia's bridal army. I thought that was the end of it. A minor skirmish in a long, cold war. I was wrong. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was at home trying to write a toast that was both heartfelt and Eleanor approved when my phone rang. It was my mother. "Sarah, darling," she began, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that immediately set my teeth on edge. "Your father and I have been talking, and we've had to make a very, very difficult decision." I waited, my stomach twisting into a knot. "Okay?" "We, and Amelia agrees, of course. We think it would be best if you didn't attend the wedding." The silence that followed was so profound I could hear the hum of my refrigerator. I thought I must have misheard. What are you talking about? Mom, the wedding is in 2 weeks. I'm a bridesmaid." "Well, you won't be anymore, obviously," she said, as if explaining a simple change in dinner plans. "Honey, we just feel that your energy has been very negative throughout this whole process. The comments about the dress, your lack of enthusiasm for the venue, it's all creating a very stressful atmosphere for Amelia. This is the most important day of her life, and it needs to be perfect. The vibe has to be right. You're ruining the vibe." I was stunned into speechlessness. Ruining the vibe? Because I didn't want a piece of satin to slice me in half? "That's insane," I finally managed to sputter. "I've done everything you've asked. I threw the bridal shower, I bought the gift, "It's not about what you've done," she cut in, her voice losing its sugary coating and turning sharp. "It's about your attitude. You're just not a team player, Sarah. And frankly, we don't want to risk you making some kind of scene or saying something inappropriate on the day. It's for the best. We'll tell everyone you came down with a sudden illness. It's cleaner that way. Cleaner. That's what I was. A mess that needed to be cleaned up. I felt a hot surge of fury mixed with a familiar, soul-crushing wave of despair. So, you're disinviting your own daughter from her sister's wedding because you're afraid I might have a personality? Don't be dramatic, she snapped. The decision is final. And then she hung up. My hands were shaking. I immediately dialed Amelia. She had to be on my side. This had to be my parents going rogue. She picked up on the third ring, her voice small and hesitant. "Hi, Sarah." "Amelia, did you know about this?" I demanded, tears starting to blur my vision. "Did you know Mom and Dad were going to uninvite me from your wedding?" There was a long pause. "They told me they were going to talk to you," she whispered. "And you were okay with it?" My voice cracked. "You're okay with me not being there? I'm your sister." I don't want any drama, Sarah," she said, and the pathetic weakness in her voice was worse than my mother's cruelty. "It's been so stressful. They're paying for everything and they just want it to be a happy, perfect day. Please don't make this a thing." "Make this a thing?" I was incredulous. "They are kicking me out of our family and you're telling me not to make it a thing?" "I have to go," she said quickly. "Liam's here. We're doing the seating chart." And just like that, she was gone. I sank onto my couch, the phone slipping from my hand. I was out. Erased from the perfect day because I didn't fit the aesthetic. I was completely alone, cut off by the three people who were supposed to love me most in the world. I stared blankly at my wall for what felt like hours, a hollow ache spreading through my chest. Just as I was surrendering to the crushing weight of it all, my phone buzzed on the floor. I ignored it. It buzzed again. Annoyed, I reached down and picked it up, expecting a follow-up text from my mother about returning the bridesmaid dress. But it wasn't from my mother. It was from a number I barely recognized, but the name attached to it made my heart stop. It was Liam, Amelia's fiancé. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened the message. It wasn't long, just 2 sentences that made no sense and yet changed everything. It read, "Don't believe a word they said. The dress wasn't the reason. I need to tell you the truth." My mind raced, trying to parse his words. The dress wasn't the reason. I knew that, not really. The dress was a flimsy excuse, a stand-in for years of my perceived failures to conform. But the truth? What truth could possibly warrant such a brutal surgical removal from my own family? Liam had always been nice, a bit quiet perhaps, overshadowed by my family's booming personalities, but decent. He was the kind of guy who remembered how you took your coffee and always asked about your work. In the 2 years he'd been with Amelia, he'd been a calm port in the storm of my family's constant drama. Why was he breaking ranks now? My fingers trembled as I typed back, "What are you talking about? Where are you?" A new message popped up instantly. "Can you meet? Half an hour. The Sparrow Cafe on Elm Street." It was a small place, miles from any of our usual family haunts, a neutral ground. Whatever this was, he didn't want an audience. "Please, Sarah, it's important." I felt a surge of adrenaline cut through the fog of my despair. Something was very, very wrong. "I'm on my way," I wrote. The cafe was dimly lit and smelled of roasted coffee beans and old books. I saw Liam tucked into a booth in the back corner, his shoulders hunched. He looked pale, his usually neat hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. He stood up when he saw me, his expression a mixture of guilt and anxiety. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice low. "Can I get you something?" "No, thank you," I said, sliding into the booth opposite him. I didn't want coffee, I wanted answers. "Liam, what is going on? My mother just dismembered my relationship with my sister over the phone and you're telling me there's a secret reason." He winced at my bluntness. "I'm so sorry, Sarah, about all of it. The way they treat you, it's not right. I've tried to talk to Amelia about it, but she just shuts down. She's so conditioned." He took a deep breath, looking down at the scarred wooden table as if gathering his courage. "What I'm about to tell you. It's going to be hard to hear, and I want you to know I only found out last night. If I had known sooner, I would have said something." I just stared at him, my heart beginning a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. "Last night," he began, his eyes finally meeting mine, "I came back to the house to pick up a suit I'd left. They thought I had already gone back to my apartment. I walked in and your parents were having a full-blown argument in the study. The door was open a crack. Eleanor was crying, and your father was yelling. Not his usual condescending tone. Real, panicked yelling." He paused, swallowing hard. "They weren't arguing about you, not at first. They were arguing about money, about the final payment for the caterer. Your mom was saying they were stretched to their absolute limit, that they couldn't possibly afford the extra fee for the late-night oyster bar Amelia suddenly decided she had to have. I almost scoffed. Of course. It was always about money and appearances. So they cut me from the guest list to save the cost of a plate? That's cold, even for them." "No," Liam said, shaking his head urgently. "No, it's not that. That's what started it. Your dad said, 'We can't touch anything else, Eleanor. There's nothing left to take.' And she shot back, 'What does it matter? It's not like she was ever going to see a dime of it anyway.' That's when I heard your name." A chill snaked its way up my spine. "What are you talking about? What money?" Liam leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Sarah, did you know your grandmother, your mom's mother, left you an inheritance, a trust fund? It wasn't massive, but it was significant. It was supposed to be given to you on your 30th birthday." I stared at him, my mind a complete blank. I would be 30 in 6 months. A trust fund? My grandmother had passed away when I was a teenager. I'd received a few sentimental pieces of jewelry, nothing more. My parents had never ever mentioned anything about a trust. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible. They would have told me." Liam's face was etched with pity, and that was almost worse than anything else. "They were the trustees, Richard and Eleanor. They had control of it until you turned 30. According to your dad, they started dipping into it a couple of years ago. Small things at first, a new car, a trip to Europe. But this wedding, Sarah, this wedding is what drained it. The venue, the $10,000 dress, the imported flowers, it's all from your trust. They spent it all." The air left my lungs in a silent whoosh. The floor of the cafe seemed to drop away beneath me. It wasn't just that they'd disowned me, they had stolen from me. They had stolen my future, a gift from my grandmother, and used it to build a monument to their own vanity. Every sneer about my more modest lifestyle, every condescending comment about my practical car or my small apartment. It was all a lie, a performance to cover up their grand theft. "That's why they uninvited you," Liam said, his voice thick with disgust. "It wasn't about the dress or your vibe. Your great-aunt Carol is coming to the wedding. Apparently, she was the executor of the will. Your parents are terrified that she'll make small talk with you, ask you what you plan to do with your inheritance when you get it next year, and the whole thing will blow up in the middle of their perfect party." My vision swam. I felt sick. Betrayal was an inadequate word for this. This was a violation on a cellular level. But through the roaring in my ears, one thought clawed its way to the surface. Amelia, my sister. "And Amelia," I choked out, my voice barely audible. "Does she know?" Liam's expression crumbled. He looked away, unable to meet my eyes, and that was all the answer I needed. "Sarah, the argument, that's how it ended. Your mother was worried you'd find out, and your father said," he said, "Don't worry. Amelia knows where the money came from. She's not going to say a word. She wants this wedding more than she wants a sister." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. She wants this wedding more than she wants a sister. All the air in the cafe seemed to vanish, replaced by a thick, suffocating pressure. Amelia knew. She knew they were funding her fairy tale with my future, and she let them. She stood by and let them call me, let them cut me out, not to protect her perfect day, but to protect their shared dirty secret. The dress, the vibe, the drama. It was all a carefully constructed lie to get the one person who could expose them out of the room. My entire life replayed in my head, but now seen through this horrifying new lens. Every time they'd called me ungrateful for not wanting to participate in some extravagant display. Every time they'd praised Amelia for being so accommodating and sweet-natured. It was never about our personalities. It was about my utility versus her compliance. I was the one who asked questions, the one who might look too closely at the numbers. Amelia was the one who would happily look the other way as long as the champagne kept flowing. "I have to go," I said, my voice flat and distant. I was moving on pure, cold adrenaline. The grief and shock were there, lurking just beneath the surface, but right now, they were being held at bay by a white-hot, diamond-hard rage. "Sarah, what are you going to do?" Liam asked, his face creased with genuine concern. "I have the original trust documents. I made a copy. My uncle is a lawyer, and I had him look at it. What they did is highly illegal." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. The quiet, unassuming man my sister was about to marry. He was risking everything, his relationship with Amelia, his future with my parents, to tell me this. He was doing what my own sister, my own blood, refused to do. He was choosing me. "Why?" I asked, the single word hanging in the air between us. "Why are you telling me this, Liam?" He sighed, a deep, weary sound. "Because it's wrong. Because I've watched them chip away at you for 2 years, and I've stayed silent because I love Amelia and I didn't want to rock the boat. But this is a line you don't cross. I can't marry into a family that would devour one of their own and call it a party. I can't build a life on a foundation that rotten." He looked down at his hands. "And selfishly, I don't want my wife to become her mother. If I let this happen, if I let her get away with this, she will. She's already halfway there." His honesty was a small, flickering candle in the crushing darkness of my family's betrayal. I took the folded papers he offered me, a copy of the trust. My grandmother's signature was at the bottom, a familiar, elegant scrawl that made a fresh wave of grief crash over me. "Thank you, Liam," I said, my voice finally steady. "You have no idea what this means." He just nodded. "Be careful, Sarah. They're cornered. They'll be vicious." I walked out of the cafe and into the bright afternoon sun, feeling like a ghost. I spent the next 48 hours in a fugue state, poring over the documents, contacting my own lawyer, a friend of a friend, and letting the full scope of their deception sink in. The total amount they had spent was staggering. Enough for a down payment on a house, enough to start my own business, enough to give me the kind of security they had always lorded over me. They hadn't just stolen money, they'd stolen my independence. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies, confirmed everything. It was a clear-cut case of fraudulent misappropriation of trust funds. We could sue. We could press charges. The public humiliation alone would destroy my parents' carefully curated reputation. The beautiful wedding would be forever tainted by the ugly truth. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up with a chilling sense of calm. The rage had coalesced into a single, sharp point of purpose. For 2 weeks, I had been a ghost to them, banished, erased, forgotten. Well, the ghost was coming back to haunt the feast. I didn't choose a suit or a formal dress. I chose my armor, a simple, elegant black sheath dress, the kind of dress one wears to a funeral. I did my hair and makeup with meticulous care, not to look beautiful, but to look formidable. Unflinching. As I put on my grandmother's pearl earrings, the one small thing they hadn't been able to liquidate, I looked at the woman in the mirror. I didn't recognize her at first. The usual flicker of self-doubt in her eyes was gone, replaced by an icy resolve. I drove to the venue, a sprawling, opulent country club an hour outside the city. I bypassed the main entrance where the ushers would be. I knew the layout from the endless planning meetings. I walked around the manicured gardens to the service entrance, my heels sinking slightly into the lush grass. The sounds of the string quartet drifted through the air, playing a soft, romantic melody that sounded mocking to my ears. I found the bridal suite easily. The door was ajar, and I could hear the high-pitched laughter of the other bridesmaids, the frantic instructions of the wedding planner, and my mother's voice, sharp and commanding, rising above it all. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room fell silent. 7 faces bridesmaids. The makeup artist, the planner turned to stare at me, their expressions ranging from confusion to shock. My mother's face went white as a sheet. My father, standing by the window in his tuxedo, looked like he'd seen an apparition. And then there was Amelia. She was sitting in a large armchair in front of a mirror, a vision in white lace and silk, a diamond tiara sparkling in her perfectly coiffed hair. Her smile froze on her face, her eyes widening in a mixture of fear and disbelief. "Sarah," my mother breathed, finding her voice first. "What are you doing here? You are not welcome. You need to leave right now." I ignored her completely. My eyes were locked on my sister. I took a slow step into the room, then another. "Hello, Amelia," I said, my voice as cold and clear as a winter morning. "You look beautiful. It's amazing what a person can buy when money is no object, especially when it's someone else's money." A collective gasp filled the room. The bridesmaids exchanged panicked glances. The makeup artist slowly backed away, and the wedding planner started frantically whispering into a headset. Amelia's face, which moments before had been a portrait of bridal bliss, crumpled into a mask of pure terror. She couldn't look at me. Her eyes darted to our parents, pleading for them to make me disappear. My father was the first to recover. He strode towards me, his face turning a blotchy red. "That's enough, Sarah. Get out. You're making a scene." "A scene?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, Dad, we're just getting started. I believe we have some financial matters to discuss, specifically the Sarah M. Ellison Trust Fund. Does that ring a bell?" My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Eleanor, the woman who was always perfectly composed, looked like she was about to faint. "You don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "Oh, but I do," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. I held up my clutch. "I have copies of everything, the will, the trust, the bank statements showing years of withdrawals for vacations, cars, country club memberships, and, of course, for this little party." I gestured around the opulent room. Every single imported peony, every crystal on that chandelier, every bite of prosciutto-wrapped melon you'll be serving later, all paid for with money my grandmother left for me. Money you stole. The room was utterly silent now, save for the faint strains of Vivaldi from the garden. I turned my attention back to my sister, who was now trembling, tears threatening to ruin her expensive makeup. "And you knew, didn't you, Amelia?" I asked softly, the quiet tone more damning than any scream. "You knew the whole time. You let them kick me out of my own family to cover your tracks. You stood on my future to get a better view on your wedding day." Tears began to stream down her face. "It wasn't like that," she sobbed. "They said they'd pay it back. They said it was just a loan." "A loan you were happy to accept," I shot back, my composure cracking for a moment. "A loan you never bothered to mention to the person whose life you were mortgaging. Was it worth it, Amelia? Is this wedding worth our entire relationship?" Before she could answer, the door swung open again. This time it was Liam. He was dressed in his tuxedo, looking every bit the handsome groom, but his face was grim. He walked past my parents, past the stunned bridesmaids, and stopped right in front of Amelia. He didn't even look at me. "Is it true?" he asked her, his voice low and heavy with a pain that resonated deep in my own chest. "Did you know they were using Sarah's inheritance to pay for all of this?" Amelia looked from Liam to our parents, her face a mess of tears and desperation. "Liam, please," she begged. "Not now. We can talk about this later. Our guests are arriving." "No," he said, his voice firm. "We'll talk about this now. Did you know?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. Her silence was a confession. Liam's shoulders slumped, a barely perceptible movement, but it was like watching a building crumble in slow motion. He reached up and slowly, deliberately began to unpin the boutonniere from his lapel. "What are you doing?" my mother shrieked, finally snapping out of her stupor. "Liam, stop this nonsense. You're getting married." He placed the small white rose on the vanity table next to Amelia's bouquet. "No," he said, finally looking around the room at my parents, and then at me. "I'm not. I can't marry a woman who would conspire with thieves to steal from her own sister. I can't join a family built on lies and greed." He turned back to Amelia, his expression softening into one of profound sadness. "I love you, Amelia, but I don't recognize the person you've become. Or maybe I just never saw who you really were." He then walked over to me. He gently took my arm. "Come on, Sarah," he said quietly. "Let's get out of here. This isn't your circus, and these aren't your clowns." As he guided me out of the room, my father shouted, "You'll regret this, both of you. You're ruining everything." I stopped in the doorway and looked back over my shoulder at the wreckage of their perfect day. Amelia was sobbing uncontrollably, a princess in a crumbling castle. My mother was frantically trying to console her while my father just stood there, sputtering with impotent rage. "No, Dad," I said, the finality of the words settling in my soul. "You already ruined everything. This is just the bill coming due." Liam and I walked out into the sunshine, leaving the sound of the string quartet and the shattered fantasy behind us. In the months that followed, the fallout was biblical. My lawyer, Ms. Davies, sent a letter of demand to my parents that was a masterpiece of legal devastation. Faced with public exposure and criminal charges, they capitulated completely. They were forced to sell their house, the house I grew up in, to repay the trust. They became social pariahs. The wedding, of course, was canceled, the story of its dramatic implosion becoming whispered gossip in their social circle. Amelia tried to contact me a few times, sending tearful, self-pitying texts. I never replied. The sister I knew, or thought I knew, was gone. She was a casualty of her own choices, a ghost in a life that could have been. Liam and I, surprisingly, became friends. We were two survivors of the same shipwreck, bound by a shared trauma and a mutual respect. He supported me through the legal battle, and I supported him as he grieved the end of his relationship and started a new life. There was no romance between us. It was something purer, a friendship forged in fire and truth. A year later, on my 30th birthday, the full amount of my inheritance, plus damages, was deposited into my bank account. It wasn't a windfall. It was a reclamation. I didn't buy a fancy car or a big house. I used it to quit my soul-crushing job and start my own small graphic design business, something I'd always dreamed of. For the first time, my future felt like my own, not a script written by someone else. I finally had what my parents' money could never buy: freedom, integrity, and peace. I had lost a family, but I had finally, truly, found myself.